Alright everyone, we start off today with the obvious, which is more Biden foibles, specifically his Trump derangement syndrome flashcards and his non-answer on Putin, both of which, first and foremost, link in the description. I won't archive it, it's a tweet, and it's to the initial video of his non-answer on Putin, with a very, very, very long, drawn-out pause. Like, if I did this on a YouTube video, people would think I had a mini-stroke, like Ron Paul or something. First and foremost, though, if you're watching this video on YouTube, links down below in a pinned comment to 4 other video hosting sites that I use. Keep in mind, I make 4 videos a day, only 2 of them end up on YouTube at this point. Joe Biden, in the link in the description, of course, was asked whether he still thought that Vladimir Putin was a killer. This is something that he pointed out during the primaries. It was basically, he was trying to juxtapose himself with Trump, because the straw man, the lie, is that Donald Trump was soft on Putin, he was a friend of Putin. Now, this was never true. He simply knew how to deal with Putin. Same with Kim Jong-un and some of these others, Assad. It was Trump, let us not forget, that passed the most stinging sanctions on Russia that have been passed in modernity, which was on Nord Stream 2, delaying their gas pipeline for several years, forcing the Germans and others not to accept it. That's a lot of money. That's like the biggest energy project other than the Chinese pipeline that Putin's been invested in his entire career, and Trump effectively stopped it. Biden has undone those sanctions. Well, the proof is in the pudding. Actions speak louder than words, but if you've got Trump derangement syndrome, you're not willing to acknowledge this because you think that Trump was like Putin's lapdog, and Biden comes out and says all the right things. He says, well, man, I'm going to take him out behind the woodshed. I'm going to call him a killer to his face. Then, at this latest summit, he's asked, does he still believe that Putin is a killer? Link in the description. Where's the actual answer? There is none. He basically says, well, Putin has, and then he pauses for like 10 fucking seconds, and then he completely ignores the question and starts talking about other things. He's not going to be hard on Putin. He's Putin's friend. Joe Biden is the pro-Putin because he's a globalist. Putin's a globalist too. I love it when people do the us versus them thing, and they're like, well, the U.S. government's imperialistic and bad, and they've got global homo and all this stuff. Oh, well, Vladimir Putin must be great. No, he's just another globalist. He just happens to have a different moral strategy in mind. But here's the thing. Globalism is mainly about money and power. All the moral stuff, it doesn't matter. Nobody gives a goddamn shit. They don't care if you run an ethno-state as long as you're sucking the globalists off. They don't care. That's the whole point. Essentially world fascism when you think about it. Vladimir Putin is just another tin horn, just like Beijing Biden and all these others. Trump was a populist. He knew how to deal with things. He got propagandized about and shafted. He was literally the one going hard all in on Putin, and he got called his puppet by the legacy media. Biden rescinds those sanctions, because Nord Stream will trickle down to the U.S. as well, because the Europeans will save money on energy, and so they'll buy other consumer goods from the United States. It's elementary, my dear Watson. When you draw multiple countries together in energy and trade deals, while it gives a country potentially leverage, it also draws people closer together. Now, the initial globalist goal was to prevent war. That very quickly got warped into, hey, we can prevent competition, and we can have an empire. It'll be a world of nations, but it'll be our world. It'll be the world of the elite. That's the whole fucking point. They want to take over the world without even fighting a war. It's basically, it's imperialism. It's soft imperialism. So Beijing Biden, literally demented at this point. I think fewer and fewer people actually think he's coherent. The only problem is the legacy media won't air clips like this. You're not going to see this on CNN. They're not even going to ask the question about Biden's cognitive decline. They did this about Trump every weekend. They never have said so about Biden. They say, well, he's got a stutter. He could be 100 years old and he could literally wander out naked, and they would say that it was just him being quirky at this point. Second, you had a picture somebody took of a flashcard that Biden was holding, and it was basically like Trump, Orange Man bad. And this was when he was giving his speech there to the Economic Forum, Gesundheit, basically like talking about Trump's DOJ, and how, well, we got a lot of work to do because we were left a mess, and basically like Trump derangement syndrome, the flashcard, literally. And I'm thinking to myself, it's not abnormal for a politician giving a speech with or without a teleprompter to have notes in front of them. That's not abnormal. What's abnormal is that everything on that flashcard didn't involve Biden having some great idea, Biden putting forth some great economic reform, we're going to work together, talking points about what he wants to do. That's not what was there. The talking points were all about how everything that went wrong is the result of the last guy in office. No, it's not my fault that we've got stagflation. It's not my fault we got poor relations in Korea, freezing of the Cold War there. It's not my fault that Putin is sour grapes. It's not my fault X, Y, and Z. Orange man bad. It's literally, he's been in there for months, and he's still blaming the last guy for literally every problem that happens. The border crisis, which never existed under Trump, somehow is Trump's fault. The man who tried to close the border, the man who actually deported illegals, the man who actually went after sanctuary states and cities, mostly unsuccessfully, but he did try several times, stymied by Republicans, by the way, at multiple ventures. That guy's responsible for the border crisis. Just to be clear, he's the one, it's not the dude who during the primaries basically said, "Come all ye unfaithful." He's not the one to blame. The one that pulled back the ICE forces, the one that overwhelmed the southern border. Now, it's Orange Man's fault. Orange Man is somehow responsible for the inflation that's the result of Biden's initial stimulus injection back at the very dawn of his presidency. But somehow Trump is responsible for that, despite the fact that a year passed since the initial bill. Somehow, there's one hell of a delay, by the way. Trump is responsible. Somehow. Orange Man is responsible for Putin acting up, despite the fact that Orange Man passed the Nord Stream sanctions, literally hardballing Putin, kicking him in the balls. Russia Energy is the big sector over there that they're trying to grow. They get gas and oil and shit like that. So do we. If we want to compete, makes sense to sanction Nord Stream so we can sell to Western Europe. But Biden decided to withdraw. He decided, fuck it. Yeah, it's okay if Russia makes hundreds of billions of extra dollars a year. Yeah, by the way, I'm going to challenge into a push-up contest. Yay. It's going to be really funny to see all the results of his joint conference with Putin that you're not allowed to see publicly, by the way, because it's going to be a wash. It's not going to hardball him at all. He's going to say, oh, ha, 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 yeah, that campaign bluster was really funny now, wasn't it? Now let's strike some deals behind closed doors. For globalism's sake. He'll be, goose-stepping around the hallway in private. It's not abnormal for him to have a flashcard. There's nothing wrong with that. It's abnormal that nothing there pertained to what he wanted to do himself. That's very, very telling. It is an extension of the Trump derangement syndrome we've seen now for years from the legacy media and from the Democrats. There's no good ideas that they have to offer. There's no nobility or progress or anything good for the middle and working classes there. All they can do is blame the problems that exist that they helped to create structurally over decades of a globalist neoliberal economy on one man who, by and large, other than deregulating things with executive orders at the bureaucratic level and getting some of his wall accomplished, was stymied and constantly had to fight an uphill battle to do goddamn anything. Trump had to fight an uphill battle to be able to even meet with Putin because the optics were so skewed, so queered, by the fact that the legacy media propagandized 24/7. He was scrutinized about how he shook Putin's hand. If Biden shakes Putin's hand in exactly the same fashion, you're going to see analysis about how, well, this is a powerful handshake, really projecting America's strength. Meanwhile, Biden, after he meets with Putin, will do the same thing he did here. He'll be demented, he'll break down gibbering and go off the script when he takes a few softball questions, and he won't even be able to answer them. You've got more and more people around the world goddamn chuckling and laughing and nodding and shaking their heads at why the United States could possibly tolerate the fact that we've got a so-called leader incapable of leadership. We have a vice president who's tasked with the border crisis, the most important domestic crisis other than inflation we currently suffer with. She hasn't even, after 3 months, hasn't even visited the border once. This is a dysfunctional administration. It's an asterisk administration. These people don't know what they're doing. They're all over the place. They're worse than Carter. They're less competent. At least Jimmy Carter, at the end of the day, meant well. At least he wasn't a complete neoliberal globalist. He was more of a domestic liberal. He actually gave a shit. He just had weird ideas. He tried, though. He still failed, and by and large was then kicked out because of conditions roughly the same as what we have now. inflation, high unemployment, lots of diplomatic crises, and a president that seems a little bit out of touch. Only now it's not a little bit out of touch, it's goddamn out of his mind. I would be so surprised if he manages to go his full term without getting 25th, getting kicked out by his own cabinet, or having to resign. I would be extremely surprised if that's the case. By the way, that means the first female president won't even be an elected official. She'll have ascended to that office despite coming in, 6th place in her own party primaries. And if she's crazy enough to run, she'll get slamma-jammed by any Republican that runs against her. The Democrats have walked into the trap that I told them they would walk into, where Biden is clearly progressing in his dementia. This is not a stutter. A stutter doesn't cause you to pause for 10 seconds, lose track of what you were saying, and pivot to an entirely different subject. A stutter does not require you to base your entire first major diplomatic meeting with G7 summit, first major meeting with multiple world leaders. He had the Japanese prime minister and stuff and talked to Trudeau. This is the first really major meeting. You don't need a note card to tell you why you don't like the last dude that was in your position. It doesn't make any goddamn sense. And there are so many people that aren't even aware that these things are going on. They don't know about the note card. They don't know about Biden forgetting what he was talking about, mixing up Libya and Syria. Forgetting that the South African minister was already announced by Boris Johnson. None of these things have aired on CNN. If they do, it's in the context of right-wing conspiracy theorists are talking about how Joe Biden's got cognitive decline as a form of whataboutism because Trump's actually the one with dementia. And it's formulaic. If these people would only, get with the times, live in the 21st century and use the internet as opposed to using, or the internet insofar as independent content creation goes, as opposed to CNN or CNN.com, they'd know what was going on. They'd be frightened, honestly. The normies would be scared if they knew how demented Biden truly was. That's why you should always show things like this to them. And when they do the orangutan whataboutism thing and say, well, Trump, this, that, and the other thing, say, oh, you're comparing Biden to Trump. Oh, that says great things about him now, doesn't it? That's about all. Peace out.